What's up, everybody? A friend of mine recently injured his ankle and he asked if I had any advice in regard to rehabbing the ankle. This is a topic that comes up all the time, especially if you're an athlete or a martial artist. You're going to be twisting your ankles, rolling your ankles, spraining your ankles pretty frequently. I'm no exception. I've hurt my ankles a bunch of times and I've more or less become an expert in rehabbing them. Before I tell you what to do with your ankle, keep in mind that if you have health insurance, if you have money, if you have a doctor available, go see them. That's always the first thing you want to do, is go consult the expert. In my case, I didn't always have money, I didn't always have insurance, and I was kind of left on my own to figure things out. If you're in a similar boat, this is a good video for you, okay? Now, regardless, listen to your body. Take my advice, but listen to your body and trust your gut on some of this, okay? Before we get into it, you need to think about what type of injury you're dealing with. You can have strains, which refer to muscle or tendon damage, or you can have sprains, which refer to ligament damage. Muscles heal the fastest because they have the most blood flow. Tendons, somewhat in the middle. Ligaments have very little blood flow and they take a long time to heal. Even if you do everything correctly, it can sometimes take 6 months to a year or even more before your body is back to feeling normal, right? So just keep in mind that there may be a long road ahead of you. When you sprain your ankle, if you go see a doctor, generally, sometimes you can have a really good doctor, but the average doctor in my experience is going to tell you RICE, as in rest, ice, compression, and elevation. This isn't the worst advice ever, but there are much better ways to do it, okay? When the initial damage occurs, you want to start off with ice. So rest, good idea. Ice, good idea. Compression, take it or leave it depending on the circumstance. Elevation is good. That RICE method is great with the initial injury because after spraining your ankle is generally going to balloon up and swell with the intention of the blood flow coming to fix the problem and also to encase the problem almost like a cast to try and reduce movement and prevent worse damage from happening in the already damaged area. So ice right off the bat is a good idea. Let's say that it's the day of the injury. I would start with ice, elevation, all that sort of stuff, and of course rest it. And the idea is when it swells up, you want to relieve some of the swelling, and that will relieve some of the pain as well. Before you get too gung-ho on the ice, just be aware that swelling itself is not a bad thing. Your body is doing it intentionally. It's trying to send blood to the area to fix the problem. It's trying to encase the problem so it's not worsened. The problem with swelling is A, it's uncomfortable, and B, if you don't do anything with that swollen area, the blood eventually becomes stagnant and it's not doing much good at that point, and you get nasty bruising and whatnot. That's not what you want. So day one, you want to start with ice. I would recommend 15 to 20 minutes on at a time, depending on how severe it is. Now you can do a bag of ice, and a Ziploc bag is a common way to do it. Some people wrap it in a towel. I find that's not quite cold enough, but if you have the bag directly on your ankle, that's often too cold. So my preference is a paper towel. A paper towel to me is that perfect middle ground of coldness. Another option is to get something like this. I don't know what the official name is. I call it an ice bag. These things, you can often find them at a pharmacy or in the pharmacy section of a store like a Walgreens or a CVS, Rite Aid, something like that. This is Rite Aid. These are great because not only can you fill it with ice, you can also fill it up with hot water. So eventually when you get to the point that you're alternating the heat and the cold, you can switch back and forth on this. Now, it's not the best way to do it, but it's a good way to do it. If you're gonna fill this with ice, I would recommend filling it up good with ice and then just a little bit of water, and that'll help it conform around that ankle a little bit better. So day one, you rest it, kick your feet up somewhere, watch a movie, get some ice on it for about 20 minutes. Now, when it comes to painkillers, anti-inflammatories, that sort of thing, once again, that's a doctor's forte, right? But in my experience, something like ibuprofen or what do they call it, a leave, right? I don't remember what the actual medical term is for a leave. You can take a little bit to begin with to help reduce the swelling, but you don't want to get reliant on any of these painkillers, and you don't want to take too much because it can do damage to your organs, right? Now, once day one is over with, you want to start to alternate heat and ice. So 20 minutes of ice, just like day one, is a good idea. But what I like to do is do 20 minutes of ice, 20 minutes of heat, 20 minutes of ice, 20 minutes of heat, 20 minutes of ice, 20 minutes of heat, or you can alternate them depending. So if you're super swelled up, I would finish with the ice. If you're not so swelled up, I would finish with the heat just because it's gonna feel better. Now, you can take one of these and you can have it filled with ice, do 20 minutes, have it filled with hot water, 20 minutes, filled with ice, 20 minutes. That works fine. What I like to do is get one of these, fill it with ice, and this is what I use for my cold source, or another good one is a bag of frozen peas. And for the heat source, the best thing in my opinion is this electric heated wrap right here, right? So this is nice because you can throw it around your ankle. You can heat it to whatever level you want, and it's very comfortable, very soothing. The idea behind the alternation of the heat and ice is to create an artificial heartbeat, so to speak, in the area of the damage. Because, like I said, ligament damage, there's not much blood flow, and that's the main thing that helps to heal it. All that fresh blood is going to be bringing in what your body needs to make those repairs. So by putting the ice on it, everything is going to constrict in terms of your blood flow, and it's going to send the blood away from your ankle. When you put heat source on it, your capillaries, your veins, all that are going to open up, and it's going to draw in new blood to the area. And then you flush it out, draw in new blood, flush it out, draw in new blood. So while you're in this period of rehab, you could do this anywhere from day 2 up until you're feeling 100%. There's not much harm you can do in here apart from making it too hot or too cold or leaving it on for too long. Remember, 20 minutes each is kind of the magic number. So what I like to do is throw on a movie, roughly 2 hours, and you could do 3 sets of each. That works out great, assuming you have the time, right? Now, getting the fresh blood flow there is important for the healing process, but then it also will help the heat I'm talking about right here. It will help loosen up the joint itself, so that way it's a little more mobile, so you can start working range of motion exercises and start doing rehab exercises to strengthen the ligaments and the surrounding connective tissue so you can get back to normal. Once you have spent a couple of days dealing with the swelling first, I would begin range of motion exercises. What I mean is take that foot and test out different angles, different directions, but only to the extent that the foot can move on its own. So I'm not going to take the foot and stretch it. I'm not going to take the foot and stretch it. You don't want to stretch damaged tissue, you can just make it worse. But anything that the ankle can do on its own, go for it. So I would start by pointing and flexing. You can turn it inward and outward. And you'll notice you'll get a different effect as you straighten your toes on this. You can circle it, leading the circle with your toes. You can circle it the other direction, leading with your toes, or you can envision drawing the circle with your heel, and you'll get a slightly different effect here as well. So these basic directions are what I would recommend starting with. Once those get a little easy, you can use that as a warm-up, and then you can build up to the ABCs. So I draw an A with my toe, draw a B with my toe, draw a C with my toe, draw a D with my toe, draw an E with my toe. This will take it through a large range of motion, and it'll do that joint some good to get moving. That'll also help with the flow of things, right? Along with the basic range of motion exercises for your ankles, there's a drill I like to do that I was taught by a jiu-jitsu instructor out of Chicago that he calls monkey foot. And this does well to keep my toes strong, to keep my feet strong, to keep my ankles strong, keep everything limber, and it's just a great stretch. What you do is you start with legs extended and you draw your feet back as far as they'll go. and then you expand your toes, and then you curl your toes as if you're gripping onto something like a monkey. Now with those toes curled, you extend your foot. From here, I'm going to protrude the ball of my foot, keeping those toes wide as if I'm throwing a front kick. And I'm going to keep those spread as I draw back, curl again, forward, ball of the foot forward, feet back, curl the toes, forward. You will not believe how much this is going to cramp up your foot at first, but you do this consistently. I like to just do it in bed sometimes. It'll keep your feet nice and strong and healthy, and it'll be helpful to prevent injuries down the road by keeping everything nice and limber, okay? Another thing you can do that I've taken from Tai Chi, it's a stretch of sorts, but not really. I call it floppy foot. Assuming this is the damaged ankle, I grip my shin and I keep this foot and ankle as relaxed as possible, and I try to get it wiggling front to back, side to side, every possible direction. Now at first, when your ankle is damaged, it's probably going to be sort of fixed like it's in a boot, but the more you're able to intentionally relax the damaged area and just allow this natural floppiness, it'll help that healing process, because a lot of times when things are fixed in place and they're tight and they don't want to respond, it's often something that you can overcome with intentional thought and focus on that area. This is no different than stretching your hamstrings. You may think, oh man, this is so uncomfortable, I'm so tight, but then I can really focus on the area that's being stretched and almost have a conversation with it and communicate and say, okay, well, it's not gonna break. There's a little more room there to give. Let's just relax a little more, right? So the idea here is that you can concentrate, and sure, it's going to take some practice like anything else, but you can convince these damaged parts of your body to loosen up with intentionality. Once that gets a little easy, you want to start adding a little bit of resistance, which is where the banded exercises come in. Now there are different types of resistance bands. This one's sort of a tube, some are a little flatter. You could use a bicycle inner tube, or worst case, you could throw a towel and give yourself a little bit of resistance with your hands. These are easy to find. Sporting goods stores, Target, Walmart, buy them online, something like that, right? So the idea is give yourself a little bit of resistance and you work those same ranges of motion, but this time making it a little bit harder on yourself, so that way you gotta build the strength up, right? You can get nice and creative with this, but you're gonna do those basic range of motion exercises for the most part. Those are the initial rehab exercises you want to go with, and then once you start feeling a little more confident in the strength of your ankle, you can start upping the difficulty, so to speak, and I'll show you a few exercises there. Before I get into that though, I want you to think about how this injured ankle will affect the rest of your body. So when this is damaged, like I said, the swelling will come in and try to form a cast. You get rid of that swelling, that's good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only cast in place, right? Your muscles, the nearby connective tissue, everything is going to tighten up in an effort to keep that safe, right? So in my experience, when ankles are damaged, you're going to have a lot of tension in the calf, in the Achilles specifically. So doing things like calf stretches is a good idea, but also something to keep in mind is massage, right? So you can massage your calves all the way down, both sides, massage the muscles on the inside and the outside of your shin, basically everything from the knee down to the ankle. But I'm not massaging the joint itself so much, and I'm not massaging the knee itself so much, it's the meat in between, because your calf is going to tighten up to try to hold that in place. You can do a little bit of massage on the Achilles tendon, but don't put much pressure, just a little bit of kind of stroking motion. You don't want to dig into a tendon too much, it's not comfortable. That will help loosen the leg up to prepare it for exercise. Throwing on some heat for about 15-20 minutes before you do your rehab exercise is a good idea as well, to get it as loose and as comfortable and get that blood flowing so it's ready to work. So let's assume that I'm in week 1, maybe week 2, things are starting to feel a little better. I'm gonna start off with the heat pad, get that nice and warm. And often what I'll do is I'll massage the calf with something like Icy Hot or Bengay, or if you have some Thai oil, something like that, or even horse liniment works well. Something that really warms this up and allows it to relax. So that way my ankle is as relaxed as possible and I can start testing the strength a little bit. Now while we're talking about massaging the muscle around the ankle to loosen it up is the main thing. But if you want to get fancy with it, you can get a Chinese liniment that is called Zhengyu Shui. Now this stuff is stinky, this stuff stains, be careful with it, but it's something that you can rub onto the damaged area itself, and supposedly seeps in at a depth which is helpful to the ligaments and helps draw blood into the damaged area. Now, if you have this, just imagine I would put a tiny pool in my hand and I'd rub it in place. You want it to be a little bit of pressure, enough to draw blood into the area. I would do that maybe 2-3 times. Make sure to lay a towel down so you're not staining your bed or your couch or wherever you happen to be sitting at the time. So, massage calf down to the Achilles with something like Icy Hot, Bengay, Naman Moi to loosen all that up. That'll be nice and hot. And then you want to work the Zhengyu Shui into the damaged area itself. That'll help draw blood in, and that'll help the healing process speed up a little bit, okay? Now, once you're starting to feel a little confident in the strength of that ankle, a good way to rehab it is to start with balance exercises. So right now I've got my weight evenly distributed. Let's assume that this is the damaged ankle. I would start to transition the weight to that side, and as I get more comfortable, start to pick up the other foot. You can use it as a kickstand at first if you need to, but you eventually want to get to the point where you can balance just on that one foot. Now this takes a lot of little muscles to stabilize that you probably weren't aware of until you try this exercise, but this is a great one, and this is definitely a good place to start in terms of ankle rehab. Once that gets a little bit easy, you can make it more challenging by throwing your arms and feet and everything in weird directions and kind of making the balance a little more difficult, right? So you have to make adjustments and try to stabilize with that foot and with that ankle. Once you start doing this, your foot is going to get stronger, your toes are going to get stronger, you're going to get better at gripping the ground. And the next step from there is to start stressing it even further by rising up on the ball of that foot while you're balancing, right? So balance on one foot, a little hard on the yoga mat because it's squishy, but it still works. And then you can practice rising up and back down, rising up and back down. If you need to hold on to something, that's fine. And you start working these calf raises, which will let your leg know that it's okay to use. It'll help loosen it up a little bit. Plus you're going to be building the stabilization of that ankle in a different range of motion as you extend it. As always, you can make this more difficult. What I like to do here is take a step and do a shin check like it's Muay Thai, and then practice raising up and back down. Shin check, raise up, back down, right? Remember, working on the balance, back down. So that's a surprisingly challenging one. Once you start getting those calf raises in, you can also, if you find a staircase or a ledge, work calf raises in a fashion that allows that heel to drop slightly and get a stretch on that Achilles before you raise up. You want to do this slowly and safely though, not trying to tear anything. So imagine that heel's dropping to get a good stretch, right? once this gets easier, it'll get to the point where if you can do this sort of thing on your injured foot, strength is probably pretty good at that point. Now, from there, it becomes a matter of how to strengthen it to the point where it doesn't get injured in the future. So I like to do prehab exercises, and I do this all the time to keep my ankles strong. And one of the ways I'll do it is by bringing the weight onto my toes and working that whole extended range of motion, making sure my balance is good there. I can shift weight left, shift weight right. Basically just challenge myself in any fashion I can think of. And when that gets a little easy, I stay on my toes and I do in-place shadow boxing. So I'll work my punches, I'll work my slips, I'll even work squatting, coming up with uppercuts, work my rolls. All these little motions are very easy when your feet are flat and very difficult on your toes. Once you can get to the point that you can support yourself like this up on your toes, not only are the stabilizers going to be strong, but you'll also have built in some good habits because your ankle will be used to staying in a place in which it's strong. When your ankle is damaged, what you don't want is to re-roll it or to collapse it too far. There's going to be kind of a sweet spot about here to here, right? And you want to get used to staying in that sweet spot so that way, basically where you want to be if you were to prepare for a spring or a squat jump, something like that. All right, y'all, I hope that was helpful. I hope it helps you fix some injuries and prevent some injuries in the future. Just a quick recap, you want to take care of the swelling right away. ICE is good. The RICE acronym is helpful there. Eventually, you want to start adding some heat. You want to alternate heat and ice. You want to start to work the range of motion, and this is often helped out by loosening up the ankle with heat ahead of time, loosening up the calf ahead of time with massage. And then you want to work the range of motion limited to what the ankle can do on its own. Once that gets too easy, you're going to start adding a little resistance with the bands and whatnot. And at that point, you want to challenge yourself with stabilizing exercises, calf raises, basically everything that's involved with this foot motion. You want to challenge yourself until that builds up to the strength that you want it to be. And eventually, once you get back to your original level of strength, you want to improve that level of strength by continuously challenging yourself with new and creative ways to work the support muscles, work the toes, work the ankle itself, work the calves. Things like jump rope are great, and things like sprints and plyometrics are great for all this sort of stuff if incorporated correctly. Basically, you want to do your best to ensure that this thing doesn't happen again, but if it does, you'll know what to do. So take care. If you enjoy, give it a like, give it a comment if you have any questions or opinions on it. And if this was helpful and you think it might be helpful for someone else, please give it a share. All right, get out there and train.